The crystalline doors of the Grand Assembly stood 300 meters tall. They were carved from a single piece of quantum glass, harvested from the core of a dying star. When they opened, they made a sound like the universe itself was taking a breath. Ambassador David Kane stood alone before those doors. Behind him, Earth was a pale blue dot somewhere in the unfashionable arm of the Milky Way. Before him lay the heart of galactic civilization, the supreme chamber of the collective council. He stepped through. The chamber defied human comprehension. It was built inside an artificial planetoid, suspended in orbit around a neutron star. The walls curved upward for kilometers, lined with viewing galleries that held representatives from over 800 species. 12,000 delegates watched as the single human walked toward the central platform. Kane could feel their eyes, their sensors, their minds for those species that were telepathic. All of them focused on him with a mixture of fear and disgust that needed no translation out to them. He was a monster. Earth had been classified as a Category 9 death world. The gravity was crushing. The atmosphere was combustible. The native life had spent 4 billion years trying to kill each other. And humans were the apex predators of that nightmare realm, walking biological weapons who sweated poison and carried more bacteria than most. Planets had total life forms, the collective. Council had debated for decades whether to even allow humanity into their civilization. When they finally agreed, it was with the understanding that humans would be watched, contained, controlled. But that was before the Velith massacre. High Chancellor Morthic rose from the central throne. His body was a mass of tentacles wrapped around a crystalline core, and when he moved, light refracted through him in patterns that the translator implant in Kane's skull rendered as cold fury. Ambassador Kane of Earth. Morthic's voice echoed through the chamber, amplified by acoustic technology that was old when humanity was still living in trees. You stand before the collective council to answer for the crimes of your species. How do you plead? Kane reached the speaking platform. He was a tall man, gray at the temples, with eyes that had seen things most humans could not imagine. He had been a soldier before he was a diplomat. Sometimes the old instincts still served him well. Before I plead, Kane said, his voice steady, I would like to know the specific charges. A ripple of surprise passed through the galleries. Defendants in this chamber did not ask questions. They begged for mercy. Morthic's patterns shifted to something the translator called irritated amusement. Very well, human. You are charged with violation of the non-interference protocols. You are charged with deployment of military forces in protected territories. You are charged with acts of war against a recognized galactic species. And you are charged with the unsanctioned development of weapons technology. He leaned forward, his crystalline core pulsing with inner light. The penalty for these crimes is extinction. Your species will be sterilized. Your world will be cleansed. Your name will be erased from the records of civilization. Do you understand? 12,000 delegates held their breath. Some of them had traveled decades to witness this moment. The destruction of the Death World species. The elimination of the threat that Earth represented. Kane smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just realized he was in a room full of prey. I understand perfectly, he said. But before you render judgment, I have evidence to present. He activated his personal holographic projector. The image that appeared above his palm showed a small moon, green and blue, orbiting a gas giant. It looked peaceful, beautiful. This is Velith Sanctuary. Population, 8 million. Species, Velith. Classification, peaceful. Threat level, 0. Kane paused. 23 days ago, this moon was attacked by the Hollow. The name sent a shudder through the chamber. The Hollow were the great terror of the galaxy. biomechanical horrors that consumed organic matter and incorporated it into their collective. They had destroyed hundreds of worlds over millions of years. The Council's official policy was simple: do not engage. Do not resist. Flee if possible. Accept your fate if not. The Velith sent a distress signal, Kane continued. It was broadcast on every emergency frequency in the galactic spectrum. They begged for help. They pleaded for someone, anyone, to save them. He played the recording. The chamber filled with the sound of a Velith voice, translated into the common tongue. The terror was unmistakable. The desperation was heartbreaking. And behind the words, the screams of millions being harvested. This signal ran for 72 hours, Kane said. The Collective Council received it within minutes of its first broadcast. And in those 72 hours, how many ships did this chamber dispatch? How many weapons did you deploy? How many soldiers did you send to help 8 million innocent beings? He let the silence stretch. None. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the entire chamber. You did nothing. You let them die. You sat in this beautiful chamber, on your comfortable thrones, and you listened to 8 million people scream for help. And you did nothing. Morthic's patterns flashed with defensive anger. The Hollow cannot be defeated. Intervention would have been suicide. We made a strategic calculation to preserve our forces for defensible positions. You made a strategic calculation. Kane's voice dripped with contempt. Is that what you call it? Because where I come from, we have a different word for abandoning the helpless. We call it cowardice. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages. Security drones surged forward, weapons hot. Morthic's gavel of pure light slammed down repeatedly, demanding order. But Kane was not finished. Earth received that distress signal too. And unlike this council, we answered. He changed the holographic image. Now it showed a fleet of human ships, ugly and brutal, emerging from faster-than-light travel into the space around Velith's sanctuary. We sent 22 vessels, 4,800 personnel. We arrived 17 hours before the Hollow completed their harvest. Another image. Human soldiers in powered armor, holding defensive positions while civilians ran behind them. Hollow creatures, nightmarish fusions of metal and flesh, swarming forward. Humans falling. Humans dying. But more humans taking their place. We fought them. We died fighting them. 412 of my people gave their lives on that moon. But we evacuated 170,000 survivors. We saved them. He turned to face the galleries, looking up at the thousands of species watching. You asked about the charges against us. Let me address them. Non-interference violation? Yes, we interfered to save lives you abandoned. Military deployment in protected territories? Yes, we protected people you left to die. Acts of war against a recognized species? The Hollow are not recognized. They are classified as a natural disaster. And as for weapons development? He smiled that predator smile again. We developed weapons because you refused to share yours. Because you feared us more than you feared letting innocent people die. He faced Morthic directly. So render your judgment, High Chancellor. Sterilize our world. Erase our name. But know this, we would do it again. Every time. Without hesitation. Because when someone cries for help, humans answer. It is who we are. It is what we were made to be. And no force in this galaxy will ever change that. The chamber fell silent. And then, from somewhere in the upper galleries, a single delegate began to applaud. Then another. Then 100. Species that had feared humanity. Species that had voted for their containment. Species that had never spoken a word to a human. They were applauding not, because finally, someone was willing to fight. From the shadows of the Velith delegation, Ambassador Tessara rose. She was a luminescent being, beautiful and alien, and her voice carried the weight of millions of survivors. The Veleth invoke the ancient right of life-debt. Humanity saved our children. We owe them everything, and we stand with them against any judgment this council renders. The chamber descended into chaos. In that chaos, Cain caught the eye of Representative Granite, a being of Livingstone from the oldest civilization in the galaxy. Granite nodded once, slowly. The game had changed, and as Cain stood there, alone against the stars, he received a priority transmission from Earth Command. He read it once. Read it again. And his predator smile faded into something else. The Hollow were not finished. The main fleet, the true armada, had changed course. It was heading for Earth. The war for humanity's survival had just begun. The message reached Earth at 0347 hours. Greenwich Mean Time. By 0400, every military installation on the planet had gone to full alert. By 0500, the unified government had assembled in the deep bunker beneath the Alps. And by 0600, the entire human race knew the truth. The Hollow were coming. Admiral Helena Frost stood before the holographic display in the command center, watching the enemy fleet materialize as data points in the void. 3,000 vessels, the largest Hollow armada ever recorded, moving at faster than light speeds toward the Sol system. Estimated time of arrival, 18 days. "Show me our defenses," she ordered. The display shifted. Earth's orbital grid appeared. 72 battle stations, 140 combat vessels, 2 million personnel ready to fight. Against 3,000 Hollow ships, it was suicide. General Marcus Webb, the military liaison to the diplomatic corps, stepped forward. "Admiral, the Council has offered us terms. If we surrender Ambassador King and the commanders responsible for the Veleth operation, they will negotiate with the Hollow on our behalf." Frost did not look away from the display. "And how many times has the Council successfully negotiated with the Hollow?" Silence. "That is what I thought." She turned to face the assembled commanders. "Humanity does not surrender its own. We do not sacrifice the brave to appease the cowardly. We fight." The word hung in the air. Fight against an enemy that had destroyed countless worlds. Against a force that the entire galactic civilization considered unstoppable. Frost had read the reports from Veleth Sanctuary. She had seen what human soldiers could do when they refused to retreat. And she had a plan. Contact every allied species. The Veleth. The Stone Collective. Anyone who stood with Cain in the council chamber. Tell them Earth is calling. Tell them we need help. She paused. And tell them that if they help us survive this, humanity will never forget. We will answer every call. We will fight every battle. We will be the sword and shield of anyone who stands with us. The message went out. And across the galaxy, species that had never considered alliance with the Deathworlders began to reconsider Dot in a research station orbiting Mars. Dr. Yuki Tanaka had not slept in 3 days. She was the galaxy's foremost human expert on the Hollow, and she was staring at data that made no sense. "The migration patterns are wrong," she muttered to her assistant, a young man named Paolo Reeves. "The Hollow do not behave like this. They do not target specific worlds. They sweep through regions, consuming everything in their path. But this armada," she gestured at the tracking data, "it changed course. It specifically turned toward Earth. Maybe they want revenge for Veleth Sanctuary. The Hollow do not want revenge. They do not have emotions. They consume and move on." Tanaka pulled up older data, records from Hollow attacks stretching back millions of years. Something is different. Something has changed. She found it buried in a captured Hollow transmission, intercepted decades ago and never fully decoded. The translation software had improved since then. Now, finally, the words became clear. It is coming. It is coming. We must gather. We must prepare. The darkness approaches. It is coming. Tanaka felt ice form in her stomach. The Hollow were not attacking. They were not hunting. They were running. Get me Admiral Frost, she said. Now, on the prison transport vessel Purgatory, Commander Elena Cross sat in her cell and waited for execution. She had led the assault on Velith Sanctuary. She had given the orders that violated 17 galactic laws. And now she was the scapegoat the Council demanded. She did not regret a single decision. The cell door opened. A guard entered, followed by a woman in civilian clothes who carried herself like a soldier. Commander Cross, I am Director Anna Volkov, Earth Intelligence Division. You are being released. Cross stood slowly. I thought the Council wanted my head. The Council can want whatever they like. Earth needs you. Volkov handed her a datapad. In 18 days, the largest Hollow fleet ever assembled will reach our planet. You are the only human commander who has fought them and won. You are being reinstated with full rank and authority. You will command our ground defense forces. Cross looked at the data. 3,000 ships. Millions of Hollow creatures. It was an extinction-level event. This is not a battle we can win, she said. Then we will lose with dignity. But we will fight. That is what humans do? Cross had heard those words before. She had spoken them herself, on Velith Sanctuary, when the odds were impossible and the cause was just. She had watched 400 of her soldiers die with those words on their lips. What about the evacuation? She asked. There is no evacuation. The Council has closed the hyperspace lanes around Sol. They are containing the Hollow threat. Volkov's voice was bitter, and containing us with it. If Earth falls, humanity ends. Every man, woman, and child. 8 billion people. Cross felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. Not fear, something beyond fear, resolution. Then we do not fall, she said. Show me to my command. The Alliance came together faster than anyone expected. The Velith arrived first, their bioluminescent ships filling the space around Earth like a constellation of hope. They brought medical supplies, sensor technology, and 100,000 volunteers who had sworn life debts to humanity. The Stone Collective came next. Their ambassador, Granite, led a fleet of asteroid fortresses that could absorb damage that would destroy conventional ships. We remember when the Hollow came for our worlds, Granite said, his voice like grinding boulders. We remember hiding. We remember shame. We will not hide again. Others followed. Species that had never spoken to humans. Species that feared humans. Species that had voted for humanity's containment. They came because they had heard the recording from the Council chamber. They had heard a human ambassador stand alone against the most powerful body in the galaxy and declare that when someone cries for help, humans answer, and they wanted to believe that was true. In the war room of the flagship Earth's Defiance, Admiral Frost met with the Allied commanders. The holographic display showed their combined fleet, 300 vessels from a dozen species, plus Earth's own forces. It was still outnumbered nearly 5-1. We cannot win a conventional engagement, Frost admitted. The Hollow outnumber us, outgun us, and they do not fear death because they do not truly die. Every creature we destroy is simply recycled into the collective. Then what is your plan? Asked Tessara, the Velith ambassador turned military advisor. We do not fight a conventional engagement. Frost activated a secondary display. Dr. Tanaka has made a discovery. The Hollow are not attacking us. They are fleeing from something else. Something worse. The room fell silent. She calls it the absence. It is an entity from beyond the galactic rim. The Hollow encountered it millions of years ago. It transformed them into what they are now. And it is coming back. If that is true, Granite rumbled, then the Hollow Armada is not our enemy. It is a refugee fleet. Yes and no. Frost changed the display again. The Hollow consume resources to sustain themselves. They are heading for Earth because our system is rich in raw materials. They plan to harvest our world to prepare for their journey away from the absence. We are not their target. We are their supply depot. Tessara's luminescence flickered with distress. Then there is no reasoning with them. They need to consume us to survive. Correct. But Dr. Tanaka has found something else in their transmissions. The original Hollow species, before their transformation, had a name. They were called the Quell, and the Quell had a weapon. Something that wounded the absence once, long ago. A weapon that can hurt this thing? Tessara leaned forward. Where is it? That is the problem. Frost looked around the room at her unlikely allies. The weapon is somewhere inside the Hollow Collective. The Quell hid it within themselves before their transformation was complete. It is still there, waiting. But to reach it, we would have to communicate with the remnants of the Quell consciousness. You want to talk to the Hollow? Granite sounded skeptical. I want to remind them what they were. Before the fear. Before the running. Before they became monsters. Frost met his stone eyes. I want to give them a chance to fight instead of flee. Because that is what humans do. We give people chances they do not deserve. And sometimes that makes all the difference. The Allied commanders exchanged glances. It was insane. It was impossible. It was exactly the kind of plan a Deathworlder would devise. We are with you, Tessara said finally. To whatever end. Outside the viewport, the stars burned cold and distant. And somewhere in that darkness, the Hollow Armada grew closer. 18 days until arrival. 18 days to forge an alliance of desperate species. 18 days to find a weapon hidden inside an enemy that did not remember being anything else. And beyond the Hollow, beyond the edge of known space, something vast and terrible stirred. The absence was waking. And it was hungry. Admiral Frost looked at her allies and made a silent promise. We will not run. We will not hide. We will fight, because that is what Deathworlders do. Ambassador David Kane had never felt so alone in a room full of people. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had drawn representatives from every corner of known space. And every single one of them was arguing about whether humanity deserved to exist. The Deathworlders brought this upon themselves, shouted the crystalline ambassador, his faceted body flashing with agitation. They provoked the Hollow with their reckless interference at Valeth Sanctuary. Now they expect us to clean up their mess? The Hollow were coming regardless, countered Ambassador Tessara, her luminescence burning bright with anger. They need resources. They would have targeted some world eventually. At least humanity is willing to fight. Fight? The Melodith representative, an ancient being named Nexura, who existed as a cloud of organized thought, pulsed with something like bitter laughter. The Hollow have destroyed 1,000 civilizations. Fighting them is not courage. It is stupidity. Kane waited. He had learned, in his years of diplomacy, that sometimes the best weapon was patience. Let them exhaust themselves. Let them reveal their fears. Then speak. High Chancellor Morthic raised his gavel of light. Enough. Ambassador Kane, you requested this emergency session. Speak your piece. Kane walked to the central platform. He moved slowly, deliberately, aware that every eye was upon him. 12 days ago, I stood in this chamber and told you that when someone cries for help, humans answer. Some of you applauded. Some of you thought I was a fool. Most of you thought I was a dead man walking." He paused. "Perhaps I am. But before I die, I have some things to share." He activated the holographic display. Dr. Tanaka's data filled the air above the council chamber, translating automatically into languages that most species could understand. This is what the Hollow are running from. The image showed a region of space that was not space. It was a wound in reality, a place where stars had been erased and darkness had replaced them. Not the darkness of empty space. Something worse. An active, hungry darkness that seemed to press against the boundaries of the image itself. We call it the absence. Dr. Tanaka, our xenobiologist, has spent the last week analyzing hollow transmissions and ancient records. What she found should terrify every being in this chamber. He let them look. Let them see what was coming. The absence is not a species. It is not a weapon. It is a wound in the fabric of existence itself. Millions of years ago, it emerged from the void between galaxies and encountered the Quell, the species that would become the Hollow. It consumed them, transformed them, turned a peaceful civilization into the horror that we know today. Nexra pulsed with sudden intensity. "How do you know this?" "Because you told us." Kane looked directly at the Melodith representative. The Melodith are the oldest living species in the galaxy. Your records go back further than any other. You knew what the Hollow were. You knew what made them. And you never told anyone. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted accusations. Security drones swarmed toward the Melodith delegation. Morphic's gavel slammed down uselessly. Through it all, Nexera remained still. "You are correct," she said finally, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "We knew. We have always known." The chamber fell silent. "The absence came once before, in an age when my species was young. We witnessed its power. We saw civilizations unmade. We watched reality itself begin to fail at the edges." Her thought form flickered with ancient pain. "We learned one lesson from that horror. Do not fight. Do not resist. Hide. Survive. Let others be consumed so that something somewhere might endure." "Cowardice," Kane said. "Wisdom. The absence cannot be defeated. It can only be fled. The Quell tried to fight, and they became the Hollow. Every species that has ever raised a weapon against the absence has been destroyed or transformed. Nexera's form condensed, becoming more solid. That is why we counseled the Council to let the Hollow have their harvests. Let them consume what they need. Let them run. Perhaps they will lead the absence away from us. And when the absence finishes with the Hollow, when it turns its hunger toward the rest of the galaxy, then we will have bought time. Centuries, perhaps millennia. Time to prepare. Time to hide better." Kane shook his head slowly. "You call this wisdom. I call it surrender. And humans do not surrender. Then humans will die. Perhaps." Kane changed the holographic display. Now it showed a schematic pieced together from a dozen fragmentary sources. But perhaps not. Dr. Tanaka found something else in the ancient records. Something you forgot, or chose to ignore. The image showed a device, strange and alien. Its purpose unclear, but its power obvious even in translation. Before the Quell became the Hollow, they created a weapon. Something that could hurt the absence. They used it once, in their final desperate battle, and they wounded the thing enough to drive it back into the void. The wound took millions of years to heal. That is why the absence is only now returning. Morphic leaned forward, his crystalline core blazing. "You are saying there is a weapon that can hurt this thing?" "I am saying there was a weapon. And I am saying it still exists." Kane pointed at the schematic. "The Quell hid it. Inside themselves? Inside what they would become. The weapon is somewhere within the Hollow collective, dormant but intact. They buried it in their own transformation, hoping that someday someone would find a way to awaken it. The chamber buzzed with desperate hope. A weapon. A chance. But Nexera was not convinced. Even if this weapon exists, how would you reach it? The Hollow cannot be reasoned with. They are mindless harvesters now. The Quell consciousness is gone. Maybe not. Kane's voice was quiet, but it carried. We have a theory. The Quell are still there, somewhere, buried beneath millions of years of terror and survival. They are not gone. They are hiding. Just like you have been hiding, High Arbiter Nexera. Just like this entire galaxy has been hiding from the darkness. He looked around the chamber at the thousands of species watching. We believe we can reach them. We believe we can remind them what they were. And we believe they might choose to fight instead of run. He paused. But we cannot do it alone. We need allies. We need resources. We need every species in this chamber to stop hiding and start fighting. Tessara stood. The Velith stand with humanity. We have already committed our fleet. Granite rose, his stone form grinding with each movement. The stone collective stands with humanity. We will not hide again. One by one, other delegates rose. Not all of them. Not even most of them. But enough. Species that had never spoken to humans. Species that had opposed them. Species that had voted for their destruction. They were tired of hiding. Morthic watched the growing coalition with something that might have been wonder. Then he spoke. The Council cannot officially sanction this alliance. Too many member species oppose it, but he hesitated. We will not oppose it either. Go, fight your battle. If you succeed, the galaxy will owe humanity a debt and never be repaid. And if we fail? Kane asked, then we will hide. And pray, and probably die anyway, when our turn comes. Morthic's patterns shifted to something almost like admiration. But for now, Ambassador Kane, go show us what Deathworlders can do. The Alliance fleet assembled in the shadow of Mars. Hundreds of vessels from dozens of species gathered around the core of human warships. It was the largest multi-species force ever assembled, and it was still hopelessly outnumbered by the Hollow Armada. But Admiral Frost was not looking at the numbers. She was looking at the faces of her commanders, human and alien alike, and she saw something she had not expected. Hope. In 6 days, the Hollow reach our system, she said. In 6 days, we fight the first battle for the survival of everything. Some of us will die. Perhaps all of us will die. But we will not die running. We will not die hiding. We will die fighting. She activated the tactical display. Our plan has 3 phases. First, we engage the Hollow fleet and draw them into close combat. Human ships will lead this assault. Our psychology seems to give us some resistance to the fear effects that paralyze other species. The alien commanders exchanged glances. It made sense. Deathworlders had evolved to overcome fear. It was survival instinct pressed into their very genes. Second, Commander Cross will lead a strike team into the heart of the Hollow Collective. Her mission is to locate the Quell weapon and, if possible, contact the remnant consciousness. That is suicide, Granite rumbled. Yes, Cross said, stepping forward. It probably is. I volunteered anyway. Third, Frost continued, Dr. Tanaka will coordinate our science vessels to analyze the absence itself. If we cannot stop it with the Quell weapon, we need alternatives. We need to understand what we are fighting. She looked around the room. This plan is desperate. It relies on assumptions we cannot verify and hopes we cannot justify. It asks every one of you to risk extinction for the chance of victory. She smiled. In other words, it is exactly the kind of plan humans specialize in. Tessara's luminescence brightened. We are with you, Admiral. To whatever end. To whatever end, echoed the other commanders. Outside the viewport, the stars burned on, and somewhere in the darkness, the hollow armada drew closer. Millions of creatures driven by terror, fleeing something worse, thought in 6 days they would meet. In 6 days, the battle for existence would begin, and on the bridge of the Earth's defiance, Admiral Helena Frost made a promise to herself and to the species she represented. We will show them what it means to be human. We will show them what Deathworlders do when the darkness comes. We answer. We fight. We never surrender. And sometimes, against all odds, we win. The hollow came out of darkness like a wave of nightmares given form. Admiral Helena Frost watched them emerge on the tactical display, each vessel a twisted fusion of metal and organic matter. They moved in perfect synchronization, 3,000 ships acting as one organism, and they did not slow as they approached the Alliance fleet. All vessels, this is Admiral Frost. Hold your positions. Do not engage until my signal. Around her, the bridge crew worked in tense silence. The Earth's Defiance sat at the center of the Allied formation, surrounded by vessels from a dozen species. Human destroyers formed the vanguard. Velith medical ships hung at the rear. Stone collective asteroid fortresses anchored the flanks. It was the most powerful fleet ever assembled by organic life. It was still outnumbered nearly 5 to 1. Admiral, the hollow are entering weapons range in 90 seconds. Frost nodded. Signal Commander Cross. Tell her to begin her approach. Somewhere in the chaos of the coming battle, a single stealth vessel was slipping past the enemy lines. Inside that vessel, Helena Cross and her strike team prepared for the mission that everyone knew was probably their last. Remember, Cross told her people, we are not here to fight the hollow. We are here to talk to them. Or rather, to talk to what they used to be. The Quell consciousness is still in there somewhere, buried under millions of years of terror. Our job is to wake it up. Lieutenant James Wang, her second in command, checked his weapon for the 10th time. And if we cannot wake it up, then we die. But we die trying. Cross looked at her team. 20 soldiers, the best Earth had to offer, each one a volunteer. Humanity has been in the galaxy for 50 years. In that time, we have been feared, hated, and nearly exterminated. Today, we have a chance to change that. Today, we show the universe what we really are. And what is that? Asked Private Maria Santos, the youngest member of the team. The people who answer when someone cries for help, even if that someone is a monster. The stealth vessel slipped into the shadow of a hollow dreadnought. Invisible to sensors, silent as death. The first shots of the battle were fired at 0743 hours. Earth time. The human vanguard charged directly into the hollow fleet, weapons blazing. It was a suicidal tactic by any conventional military standard. The hollow outnumbered them, outgunned them, and had regenerative capabilities that made conventional damage meaningless. But the humans were not fighting conventionally. All ships, close to knife fight range, Frost ordered. Get inside their formations. Make them afraid to fire on us without hitting each other. The human ships were smaller, faster, and crewed by beings who had evolved to survive impossible conditions. They wove through the hollow formation like wolves among cattle, dealing damage that was healed almost instantly, but forcing the enemy to respond, and responding slowed them down. They're turning to face us, reported the tactical officer. The main body of the fleet has stopped its advance toward Earth. Good. That is exactly what we want. Frost gripped the arms of her command chair. Now we find out if Dr. Tanaka's theory is correct. In the science vessel Insight, positioned safely behind the front lines, Dr. Yuki Tanaka watched her instruments with desperate intensity. The hollow are responding to our attack with fear, she said. Their fleet-wide coordination is degrading. Individual ships are making tactical errors. Fear? Asked her assistant Paulo. I thought they were mindless. They are not mindless. They are terrified. Every action they take is driven by the need to escape the absence. When we threaten them, we trigger that fear response. She adjusted her sensors. And fear responses are not rational. They create openings. On her display, she could see the strike team's vessel, a tiny dot slipping deeper into the hollow collective. Cross and her people were approaching the core ship, the massive organic structure at the heart of the fleet that served as the hollow's central brain. Commander Cross, you are approaching the target. Prepare for Phase 2. Cross's voice came back through the comm, steady and calm. Understood. We are going in. The core ship was a horror dot. It was not built. It was grown. Millions of years have consumed organic matter, twisted and fused into a structure the size of a small moon. Its surface crawled with activity, and its interior was a maze of corridors that seemed to shift and change as they walked. Cross led her team through the nightmare with methodical precision. They encountered hollow creatures, but the beings did not attack. They watched. They followed. They seemed almost curious. They know we are here, Huang whispered. Why are they not stopping us? Because part of them wants us to succeed. Cross kept moving. The Quell are in there somewhere, and they are hoping we can save them. They reached the central chamber after an hour of navigation. It was vast, organic, pulsing with a sickly light, and at its heart, suspended in a web of neural tissue, floated a single creature dot. It was not like the other hollow. It was older, more complete, and in its ancient eyes there was something that looked almost like recognition. You came, it said, and its voice was not the mindless drone of the hollow collective. It was tired, sad, and terribly, terribly old. After all these millions of years, someone finally came. Cross stepped forward, lowering her weapon. Are you Quell? I am what remains. A fragment. A memory of what we were before the transformation. The creature's form shifted, becoming more humanoid, as if trying to make itself comprehensible to its visitors. We knew you would come eventually. The Deathworlders. The ones who answer calls. How did you know? Because we cried out once, long ago, when the absence first touched us. We screamed for help across every frequency we knew, and no one came. The ancient voice cracked with pain. We hoped that someday a species would evolve that would not make the same choice. A species that would answer. Cross felt something shift in her chest. Grief, understanding, and an anger that had nothing to do with the creature before her. We are here now, and we want to help. We know about the weapon, the thing that hurt the absence once before. The Quell fragment was silent for a long moment. Then it spoke. The weapon exists. We hid it within ourselves, in the hope that someday it could be used again. But there is a cost. The weapon will destroy us. All of us. Every hollow creature in existence. We will finally be free of what we became. It paused. We will die, and the absence will be wounded, driven back, perhaps for millions of years, as it was before, long enough for other species to prepare, to learn, to find a way to fight. The creature's eyes met Cross's, long enough for the Deathworlders to teach the galaxy how to be brave. Cross understood. The Quell were not asking for rescue. They were asking for release, for the chance to finally end their existence as monsters and die as the people they once were. Will you do it? She asked. The Quell fragment smiled, and for a moment, Cross could see the species they had been before the absence transformed them. Beautiful, peaceful, hopeful. We have been waiting millions of years for someone to ask us that question. For someone to give us the chance to fight instead of run. The smile widened. Yes, Commander. We will do it. We will end ourselves to wound the darkness. But there is one condition. Name it. Someone must carry the weapon into the heart of the absence. Someone whose consciousness can resist the dissolution long enough to detonate it. The Quell's voice dropped. Someone from a death world. Someone who does not know how to surrender. Cross closed her eyes. She had known somehow that it would come to this, that the mission would require the ultimate sacrifice. I volunteer, she said. The Quell shook its ancient head. No, Commander. You are needed here. You must lead the evacuation of your team and coordinate with your fleet. The one who carries the weapon must go alone. Private Maria Santos stepped forward. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. I will do it. Cross turned. Santos, you are 23 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. And if no one does this, none of us have any life ahead of us. Santos met her commander's eyes. You taught me what it means to be human, Commander. You taught me that we answer when someone calls for help. Well, the whole galaxy is calling now. And I am answering. The Quell fragment extended a tendril of organic matter. At its tip, a small device materialized, strange and beautiful and terrible. The weapon. Take it. Carry it to the heart of darkness. And give us our freedom. Santos took the device. It felt warm in her hands, alive with ancient purpose. How long do I have? The absence is still beyond the rim, but it is accelerating. You have perhaps 6 hours before it arrives. The Quell's voice was gentle. I am sorry we cannot give you more time. It is enough. Santos turned to Cross. Tell my parents I love them. Tell them I died well. I will tell them you died a hero. Santos smiled. Then she walked toward the exit, toward the small vessel that would carry her into the void, toward the darkness that waited at the edge of existence. Behind her, the Quell fragment began to pulse with light. Across the entire hollow fleet, creatures stopped fighting. They turned toward the core ship, toward the ancient consciousness that was finally awakening Gott, and for the first time in millions of years. The hollow began to remember what they had been. On the bridge of the Earth's defiance, Admiral Frost received the transmission from Commander Cross. The Quell have agreed. They are activating the weapon. The absence will be wounded. Cross's voice was heavy, but it requires a carrier. Private Santos has volunteered. Frost closed her eyes. 23 years old. A volunteer. Going to her death to save the galaxy. Understood. Cross, begin extraction. All allied vessels, prepare to withdraw to safe distance. Admiral, came another voice. It was Admiral Tessara, aboard her Velith flagship. The Velith owe humanity a life debt. We should be the ones to carry the weapon. Negative, Ambassador. This is our fight. No. Tessara's voice was fierce. This is our fight. All of us. The galaxy's fight. And if humanity is willing to sacrifice one of your own, then we must be willing to stand beside you. One by one, the Allied commanders added their voices. The Stone Collective. The Crystalline Dominion. Even species that had opposed humanity only weeks before. They were offering to share the burden, to share the sacrifice. Frost felt something she had not expected. Pride, not just in humanity, but in the beings who are choosing to stand with them. Negative, all vessels. Private Santos has volunteered. She knows the cost and she accepts it. Honor her choice. She paused. But when this is over, remember this moment. Remember that a 23-year-old girl from a death world taught the galaxy how to be brave. In a small shuttle racing toward the edge of known space, Maria Santos held the ancient weapon and smiled. She was afraid. Of course she was afraid. She was human, not superhuman, but she was also proud. Proud of her species. Proud of her commanders. Proud of the coalition that was fighting behind her, buying her the time she needed. The absence loomed ahead, a vast wound in reality, growing larger as she approached. She could feel it pressing against her consciousness, trying to dissolve her thoughts, unravel her sense of self. She thought of her parents, her friends, the sunset over the Pacific Ocean that she would never see again, and she kept flying. "This is Private Maria Santos of the Earth Defense Force," she said into the void, knowing that no one could hear her. "I am about to do something that should be impossible. I am about to fight the darkness itself." She flew into the absence dot, and the darkness swallowed her whole. The universe held its breath across the galaxy. Beings of every species watched their sensors, their screens, their telepathic feeds. They had heard the story of the human girl who flew into the darkness. They had seen the footage of the Allied fleet standing together against impossible odds. And now they waited to learn if courage could triumph over oblivion, out in the heart of the absence. Maria Santos fought to exist. The darkness pressed against her from every direction. It was not like anything she had experienced before. Not pain, not fear. Something worse. A feeling of being unmade, of watching her own thoughts dissolve like ink in water. She held onto the memories that defined her. Her father teaching her to swim in the ocean. Her mother reading her stories before bed. Her first day at the academy, terrified and excited and so very young. Her consciousness flickered. Parts of her were disappearing. She could feel them going, feel herself becoming less with each passing moment. But she did not surrender. She was human. She was from a death world. And she had been taught that the only true defeat was giving up. With her last shred of coherent thought, she activated the weapon. The explosion was not a physical thing. It was something beyond physics, something that operated on the level of reality itself. A wound healing a wound. An absence filling an absence. Maria Santos ceased to exist in any conventional sense. Her body was gone. Her mind was gone. But in the moment of her annihilation, something remained. A pattern. A song. A defiance that echoed through dimensions that human science could not name. And the absence screamed, it was not a sound. It was a rupture in the fabric of existence. A howl of agony that resonated through every sensor in the galaxy. The wound that Maria had carried into the darkness detonated at the creature's heart, and for the first time in eons, the absence experienced something it had never known before. Pain. From the bridge of the Earth's defiance. Admiral Frost watched the sensors in stunned silence. The absence was contracting, retreating, pulling back toward the void between galaxies like a predator that had finally encountered something with teeth. "It is working," she whispered. "By God, it is working." Across the Allied fleet, cheers erupted. Species that had never known joy shouted in celebration. Species that communicated through light blazed with triumphant patterns. The stone collective rumbled, like an earthquake of relief, but the celebration was short-lived. The hollow were dying. Across the battlefield, the monstrous fleet went silent. Ships that had been locked in combat moments before now drifted, powerless, their organic components shutting down one by one. The Quell were keeping their promise. The weapon that wounded the absence also ended their long nightmare. After millions of years of terror and transformation, they were finally free. Commander Cross, aboard her strike vessel, watched the hollow core ship collapse in on itself. The ancient Quell fragment that had spoken to her was fading, its light growing dimmer with each passing second. "Thank you," the fragment whispered, its voice barely audible. "Thank you for answering our call. Thank you for teaching us how to die well." "You taught us something too," Cross said, her voice thick with emotion. "You taught us that even monsters can be redeemed." Even the lost can find their way home. Remember us, the fragment said. Remember what we were, what we became, what we chose to be at the end. We will remember. The whole galaxy will remember. The fragment smiled one last time. Then the light faded entirely, and the Quell were gone. The aftermath of the battle was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. The absence retreated to the void between galaxies. Wounded but not destroyed, Dr. Tanaka estimated it would take millions of years to heal, if it ever did. Millions of years for the galaxy to prepare, to grow, to become strong enough to face it when it returned. But that was a problem for future generations. For now, the immediate threat was over. The Hollow were extinct. Their ships drifted empty through space, monuments to a tragedy that had finally ended. Some species proposed destroying them. Others argued for preservation, as a reminder of what fear could do to a civilization. In the end, the new Galactic Council decided to honor them. The Hollow vessels would be converted into memorial stations, places where beings of all species could come to remember the Quell and the price they paid for redemption. And at the center of the largest memorial, a statue was erected. A human girl, young and brave, holding a weapon that had saved the galaxy. Private Maria Santos, the first human hero known to every species in existence. Ambassador David Kane returned to the Grand Assembly one final time. The chamber that had once been filled with hostility and fear now buzzed with something else entirely: hope, respect, and something that looked very much like gratitude. High Chancellor Morthic rose from his throne as Kane approached. Ambassador Kane of Earth, you stand before the collective council not as a defendant, but as a guest of honor. His crystalline core pulsed with warm light. On behalf of every species represented in this chamber, we offer our deepest thanks. Kane nodded, but he did not smile. Too many had died for him to feel triumphant. We also offer something more substantial, Morthic continued. The Council has voted to revoke all charges against humanity. The non-interference protocols will be amended to include provisions for humanitarian intervention, and Earth will be granted a permanent seat on the Inner Circle. Murmurs rippled through the galleries. A seat on the Inner Circle, the highest honor the Council could bestow. It would make humanity one of the 7 most powerful voices in galactic politics. Furthermore, Morthic said, we propose the creation of a new institution, a rapid response force dedicated to answering distress calls throughout the galaxy. Ships from every willing species, coordinated from a central command. We propose calling it the Answerers. Kane felt something shift in his chest. Pride, yes, but also hope. This was what they had fought for. This was what Maria Santos had died for. The Answerers will be led by humans, Morthic said. Because you have shown us what it means to answer. You have taught us that courage is more important than calculation. That sacrifice is more valuable than survival. He paused. Will you accept? Kane looked around the chamber at the thousands of species watching. Many of them had opposed humanity. Many of them had voted for Earth's destruction. But now they were offering partnership, trust, hope. We accept, Kane said, but not because we want to lead, because we want to serve. Every species in this galaxy, from the mightiest to the weakest, deserves to know that when they cry for help, someone will answer. The chamber erupted in applause. Not the cautious applause of weeks before, when a handful of delegates had supported humanity's defiance. This was thunderous, universal, a galaxy expressing its gratitude. On Earth, the news was received with a mixture of pride and grief. 8 billion people had lived through the threat of extinction. They had watched their fleet sail into battle, their soldiers die in defense of strangers, their civilization risk everything for people they had never met. Now they learned that their gamble had paid off. Humanity was no longer the feared Deathworlders at the edge of civilization. They were the answerers, the ones who came when you called. Memorials were built for the fallen. The 400 soldiers who died at Velith's sanctuary. The crews of the ships destroyed in the battle. The strike team members who gave their lives in the hollow core ship. And Maria Santos, whose name was taught to every child as the definition of heroism. But perhaps the most meaningful tribute came not from Earth, but from the stars. 1 year after the battle, a delegation arrived from a distant sector of the galaxy. They were a species called the Melodith, ancient beings who had hidden from the absence for millions of years. High Arbiter Nexera, the same representative who had counseled against fighting, led the delegation. She approached Ambassador Kane in the gardens of the new Earth Embassy, her thought form flickering with emotions that her species rarely displayed. "We were wrong," she said. "For millions of years, we taught the galaxy to hide, to flee, to let others be consumed so that we might survive. We thought this was wisdom. And now?" Kane asked. "Now we understand that survival without courage is not living. It is merely existing." Nexera's form solidified, becoming more human in shape than she had ever appeared. The Melodith wished to join the answerers. "We wish to learn what you have taught the galaxy." "What have we taught the galaxy?" Nexera smiled, and for the first time, Kane saw that even beings of pure thought could express joy, that the darkness is not invincible, that even the lost can be saved, that somewhere in the universe there are those who will always answer when someone cries for help. She paused. "You taught us that being brave is better than being safe, that fighting for others is worth more than living for ourselves." Kane looked up at the stars, now visible in the evening sky. Somewhere out there, the absence still lurked, healing its wounds. Somewhere out there, new threats were emerging. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers that humanity could not imagine, but humanity would face them. Not alone, but together with every species that had learned what it meant to answer a call. "Welcome to the Answerers, High Arbiter," Kane said. "We have a lot of work to do." Nexera nodded. "Then let us begin." In the deep void between galaxies, the absence stirred. It was wounded, hurt in ways it had never experienced before. The weapon that the Quell had carried into its heart had torn something essential, damaged something that would take eons to repair, but it was not destroyed. It was patient. It could wait, and yet something troubled it. Something new. It could sense the galaxy now, in ways it could not before. It could feel the million worlds, the trillion beings, the vast web of life that it had intended to consume, and it could feel something else. Something that had not existed before. Hope. The Deathworlders had done something unprecedented. They had taken species that hid and taught them to fight. They had taken species that feared and taught them to hope. They had created something that the absence had never encountered in all its eons of on. Existence. Unity. The absence did not understand this. It consumed. It unmade. It turned living things into extensions of itself. That was its nature. That was its purpose. But the Deathworlders did something different. They answered calls for help. They sacrificed themselves for strangers. They fought for beings they had never met and would never know. And somehow, impossibly, it worked. The absence retreated deeper into the void, considering, learning, adapting. It would return. Of course it would return. That was inevitable. But when it did, it would face something new. A galaxy that no longer cowered. A galaxy that had learned to fight. A galaxy that had been taught by Deathworlders how to be brave. The absence was patient. It had time. But for the first time in its ancient existence, it wondered if time would be enough. In the embassy gardens on Earth, Ambassador Kane stood beneath the stars and smiled. The battle was over. The war was not. The darkness would return someday, and humanity would face it again, but they would not face it alone, and that made all the difference. Because when someone cries SOS, humanity answers. Not because it is easy, not because it is safe, but because that is what Deathworlders do. They fight the darkness, they answer the call, and they never, ever surrender. The stars burned on, 1 billion points of light in an infinite void. And across the galaxy, in ships and stations and worlds beyond counting, beings of every species looked up at those stars and felt something they had almost forgotten. Hope, because. Now they knew the truth. The darkness was vast and terrible and patient, but humanity was stubborn. And stubborn, in the end, was enough.